So it's an honour and a pleasure to be here today with Elaine Moore. Elaine, you're the winner of the CPCAB Counselling Research Award for 2023. So we welcome you to head office at Woodlands for CPCAB on a windy, blustery day. I wonder if you could just start off by telling us what was your research paper called?
My research paper was Talk With Me Outside. And it's about therapists' experience of taking their clients into the outdoor environment and how their clients experienced that and how they experienced it as therapists. So taking an indoor environment into the outdoors.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
I loved your paper. I've read your paper. It was really nice. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about what inspired you to choose that as a topic. What sort of led you down that route?
It's personal experience led me down that route. So in writing, in studying to be a psychotherapist, I had to do a dissertation. And my dissertation was during the period of COVID.
Right.
So as a trainee, you have to have a certain amount of therapy yourself. So I was midway through my therapy with my therapist, and we had been face-to-face, then we'd had to go online, and we'd come back face-to-face for a brief period, but I'd kind of reached a bit of an impasse in my own therapy experience, and I was quite impacted by going online. So everything went online, my training, my placement work, my therapy, my supervision, it was all online, in a room online. And then my therapy became that as well. And we'd gone back face to face. And I just had this impasse, and I just had this itchiness, and I wanted to go outside. So I asked my therapist if we could do that. And she was amazing. She met me in that request. A little bit reluctantly maybe in the first instance, but we talked it through and we contracted kind of how we would do that. And we went outside, and it was, I kind of want to say life-changing. I know that sounds quite big, but it was in terms of my own therapy.
Yeah.
So actually to be alongside my therapist, walking outside. So I live in quite an urban area, and we had to walk through some streets to get to a park. But there was something about having her right next to me that was really different from having her opposite me inside.
Yeah.
It was the closeness and the not looking at one another and walking. And I actually, in that experience, I shared something quite significant with her. So it was that I just thought, actually, I really want to explore this more because it had had such an impact on me. So that was where the idea came, and I discussed it with my training provider, and it kind of flourished from there.
That's lovely. I'm assuming from what you're saying as well that this wasn't something that your therapist offered particularly.
No,
so
not at all.
You brought this to her.
Yes. Yeah. And it was actually that so it was something that we did together that was brand new for her, brand new for me. So I guess both of us changed. And our relationship changed as a consequence. So that was, I don't know, I felt much closer to her being outside, which is quite interesting because inside, she has a lovely therapy room. There's nothing wrong with it. But there was something about the routine, the same time, the same, week after week. Just going outside felt really different and felt quite freeing. And so you're in an unbounded space outside. Yeah. But I really relished that. So I loved it. And I still love it now.
Yeah. And you glow when you talk about it. You light up when you talk about it. So
Yeah.
it had a big impact on you.
Yeah, it had a huge impact.
Yeah.
And that was I just thought, is it just me? Or do other people feel that? Do other therapists feel that?
So is that how you then conducted your research? You've gone and spoken to therapists who do offer this?
Yes.
So talk to me a bit about how you conducted your research with them?
Yeah, so I did, it was a narrative style research using thematic analysis. I interviewed 6 therapists from very different modalities, integrative, Gestalt, TA, psychodynamic, so a real mix. Of the 6 that I interviewed, they were all very experienced, so they've been practicing for sort of 7 years plus. Only one of them had ever done outdoor therapy before.
Before COVID?
Yes, and before that, yeah.
Right.
So, but the others hadn't done it, and it was COVID was the reason that they'd offered it. And they'd offered it because their clients, a little bit like me, I suppose, wanted face-to-face contact again. So they offered that to their clients, and they went and used their local parks to do that. And actually some of the interviews of the 6, 4 of them were done outdoors as well. Right. So walking with them outside and sitting as well on a bench and looking at views. And it was a really nice thing to do the interviews outdoors.
Yeah, in the same way that they're
absolutely
talking about the relationships they're building outside.
Yeah.
You get to interview them outside. How lovely. So what do you think are the most significant findings from the research that you conducted? What did you feel was the most significant findings, and how do you see that having any kind of contribution to the sort of larger area, I guess, of study?
The most significant findings were something around the equalising of the outdoor space. So no matter how much a therapist might try and make their therapy room unique, and individual and equal, it's still their therapy room. Even, I think, in some placement environments, the room is still has an ownership. Yeah. Whereas outside, the space doesn't belong to the therapist, it doesn't belong to the client, it's an equal space. So there was something very equalising about that, and that was one of the themes that came through. Another theme that came through was something about the humanising of a therapist. So often the therapists that I interviewed spoke about their clients perceiving them as a very, the kind of the power dynamic being with the therapist, and the therapist being almost infallible. So kind of the having it all together, being the perfect sort of therapist. Whereas outside, the space is more equal, and the same things can happen to the therapist as can happen to the client. So the therapist might get wet alongside the client, and there were therapists that spoke about those experiences of when they went out. It started off as a beautiful sunny day and it ended up wet and windy, a bit like today. And they would both get wet, and they might sit down and they'd both get wet bottoms or...
There's something sharing about that, isn't there? There's
absolutely.
Something about, both experiencing it at the same time together in that way. Yeah.
Which is lovely.
Yeah.
Just like we might share the autumn colours, and it becomes a shared experience, which becomes an equalising experience and a humanising, I suppose. So that was, really lovely. Another theme was the kind of dynamic interplay of nature and how the seasons might affect a client, the changing seasons. So maybe walking the same path through the spring and then experiencing it in the winter, and what that might mean. There was a symbolism of nature as well. So another one therapist spoke about their client who they walked over a bridge, and the client pointed to the other side of the bridge and said, "That's where I want to get to." Kind of post-divorce, post this thing, big thing happening to me. That's where I want to be. So it's bringing nature into the relationship and using it in a way to express emotion.
And using, I guess, the metaphors of the things around you, the things that are available around you,
absolutely,
to explain and to help to explain how you feel. In a therapy room, there wouldn't necessarily be that viewpoint to be able to say, I want to be on the other side of that bridge. I remember that part of your research paper. It was very powerful to hear that, because you put a photograph of the bridge in the paper, and it looked like a very powerful image.
Yeah.
And you can almost imagine that therapist recalling that session with the client.
Yeah.
Okay. As a more generalised question, you've conducted this research. Why do you think research in general is important in the field of counselling?
It's a way of exploring, I think, exploring things that matter. And I think, I don't know, in a sense, my own experience as a therapist is we are researchers because we're researching all the time about ourselves and about our clients. Our job is to find out about our clients and to help them find out about themselves. So I think, in a sense, research is fundamental to therapy and the field of therapy. And the piece of research I've done around the outside, in my own training experience, it was the outside was never brought inside, or we never really went outside. So I think as students training, research is important in so many ways as well, and on so many levels, in terms of finding out about new things, about how you might want to conduct therapy and how you might want to do it. It's
a curiosity, isn't it?
Absolutely.
A curiosity of how else might something be done?
Yeah.
How do other people do something? What, what intrigues us about something? So it is about having that curiosity, I guess.
Yeah.
You said there about counselling training, and that in your experience of counselling training, the outside really never was brought inside. How do you, can you see a way that your research might be able to support the findings, I guess, that you've got, that bringing the outside in or taking the two people that are inside out has a different effect on the therapeutic relationship? Do you see that in training that it might be useful?
Definitely. I think useful in terms of building the confidence of the practitioner. I think in the research, and another research that's been conducted about outdoor therapy, there is a reluctance for therapists to take it outside. And I think could be a reluctance of lecturers and teachers to take it outside because the comfort sits within the indoor space. And it's much easier to do that because it's a predictable environment. So we're contained in the indoors, we're safe, we know what to expect, we know where things are. So in that sense, it is very safe, very contained. So there's a reluctance and maybe even a laziness to take it outside, because the minute we take it outside, the space is open, it's unbounded. Lots of things can happen. The risk is increased, health and safety is increased. So all the things that therapists use to contain a relationship become more exposed outside, including the client-therapist contract. And that's the same with perhaps a student-teaching contract as well. So I think, to broaden teachers and therapists' views to take it outside and to think that it is okay to do that. And things might happen, but you will overcome them together.
There's learning, I guess, in the unpredictability.
Absolutely.
There's some learning in that in itself, I suppose. So that would be really useful.
To take some risk, but risk taken with safety, I suppose. And also risk taken in collaboration. So the therapist that I interviewed spoke about a fluid contract. So if you're contracting with your client about going outside, then what's okay for you and what's okay for them? How might you negotiate hazards that you might come across? So who opens a gate first and that type of thing, and if a client might want to sit down, or the therapist might need to sit down. So it's about contracting how you might do that. What happens if you come across somebody you know as you're walking? How you would deal with that together. So agree these things before you do it. And also if somebody, might come up, or a dog might come up, or somebody might come and ask you for directions. So, and it's the same in the teaching environment. It's about negotiating in the relationship about how you're going to overcome obstacles that might happen.
Brilliant. Do you have any future research projects, any areas of study that you're excited to explore based on the current research, or is there something entirely different out there for you now?
I love outside, and so I think if I do more research, it will be around this area. Yeah, I would love to find out where I believe there's a shortage of research is from the client experience.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I think it would be really interesting to explore a client's perspective of how they perceive the outside in therapy to be different from inside.
Well, we've gone full circle. It's where you started.
Absolutely.
Because you said, didn't you, this is what I did as a client.
Absolutely,
so it'd be really interesting to find out how other clients have perceived it.
Yeah.
And you seem to have got a huge amount from being that client.
Yeah.
And exploring that enough to send you down this research path.
Yeah, and I offer it now as in my own therapy for my own clients, and also I think another piece of research is for training providers to try and encourage them to do it. Yeah, would be really interesting, and I think there's perhaps a shortfall there in that. So,
what would the student experience be like, being outside, being somewhere more natural, I suppose, less contained?
Yeah, and creative.
Yeah, be really interesting.
Yeah.
And then I guess the last sort of question for you is what is next for you? Do you have any plans for another piece of research?
Yeah, I'd love to. After I finish my dissertation, as I'm sure many students say, never again. But I don't know, it's over a year now, and I'd love to do more research. Because as I say, I think it's kind of it's embedded in me as a therapist, because it feels like that's what I'm doing all the time. So I think to do a piece of research would be great, and to encourage others to do it as well, as in others to go outside. So I think what is that reluctance about is a piece of research in itself as well. There's so much to do, I think.
Absolutely. So. Well, I really look forward to seeing what else you research and anything else you might write. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.